Welcome to the April 24th bhyve production user call. We have Rod, Andrew, Hans, Jan, Eva, Mike, Patrick, Vincent, myself, Michael, and we have 1 point from Jason Tubner on the Fediverse, and he's wondering if he can create some giant disk images for bhyve using the truncate command. And Jan kindly did some math and produced first a 64 terabyte image, and maybe I missed a little copy and paste here. You came up with a petabyte thin provision image. Is that accurate?
Yes, and it's as easy as just computing it with a shell expansion and then
Oh, there it is.
giving it to truncate.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I don't know how much overhead you will have once you start populating that file with written blocks, because I never had a use for a 1 petabyte file.
I have a curious question. How long did that command take?
Fraction of a second, and basically the shell returned immediately.
Oh, it's
That's
just a bunch of zeros kind of a thing?
No,
it's
No,
pretend file.
even less, it's a sparse file.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which means that there's only a lazily mapped file of zeros.
It's just essentially metadata saying there's a file that's this big, but it doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, exactly. And whenever
Yeah,
you
okay.
try to read, you get zeros
Right.
synthesized from 0 pages.
Okay.
And when you write, it then actually has to store where the written ranges are, and you can give a special flag to the seek call to seek to the end of the current whole or data.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
So yeah, trying to run this through cat would take a long time.
I am curious what Anjanig is doing on his giant scientific system where he's dedicated the bulk of the underlying resources to a virtual machine for reasons. Would be
VDEVs.
interesting. VDEVs? Okay, you remember that? Awesome. Your memory is a little better than mine.
I think he gives 1 point something terabytes to the RAM to the
great.
Windows Linux guest. And there were some issues where something had to be fixed, I think, because ours past 1 terabyte, some Linux bugs caused issues because some code just couldn't handle more than 1 terabyte of physical memory reported the way bhyve does.
Memory, yes, but storage also VDEVs. Do you recall how
No, more than a terabyte of disk space isn't the problem.
Yeah,
It
okay.
hasn't been a
Yeah.
NPI history as far as I know.
Cool. Eva, are you still in the network configuration phase of OpenPower work, or have you booted anything up yet?
Yeah, the system is on and it's fine. I'm just working on the cabling for the remote access.
What OSs have been happy on that?
It is fine with FreeBSD 14 and Fedora 40 and Red Hat 9.
Okay, cool.
Oh, and Gentoo, whatever it was the last time I was using it in 2023. I think that was kernel 5.12, maybe.
Oh, wasn't that old even then?
I don't remember it exactly, but I was going through building Qemu from source, and Gentoo was my sort of last ditch sort of thing where I don't really prefer Linux, just to be honest, and you know, I don't know what else to say. Gentoo was what I landed on after going through a whole bunch of different distros. And for corporate purposes, I default to Red Hat and Fedora. So this was shortly about like 6 months after the whole like CentOS getting ripped away from the community and being very disgruntled. So I was using Gentoo to do all the Qemu and libbert recompiling.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not funny, but also true. Thank you for sharing that. I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, the rug pull from CentOS, I'm assuming cost a whole lot of money in tattoo removal. And thank you, vendor, rather than say public benefit nonprofit. Patrick, you are unmuted. What's on your mind? What you working on?
Sorry, I'm just clicking on it's okay while an installer is running.
Oh, cool. Yes, next,
Just-
finish. What you installing?
I have the small netbook that I triple boot now with FreeBSD, with graphical environment, Windows 10, and Haiku operating system.
Haiku, tell us about what you're doing on Haiku, if I may, and does it work under bhyve?
I'm just trying it out on a very old, weak machine with 2 gigabytes of memory and 2-core Celeron something, and it's just flying. It's amazing. Great piece of work.
Was
It's
that the, hold on, is that a BOS clone or something else?
Yep, that's the open source successor to BOS. It's got virtual memory and memory protection and everything, but it's single user. So there is no login process, user management, or anything. You fire it up and you're immediately booted into your desktop. It's sufficiently POSIX compatible to be able to port things like Firefox and other applications, and it's just blindingly fast.
And again,
It's
does it work
amazing
under
how-
bhyve?
Pardon?
Does
No,
it work under
I
bhyve?
tried in an emulator because I happen
Okay.
to have this nice piece of hardware that looks like a perfect fit.
Okay, cool.
I'm
Go ahead.
just circle back to VMware for a minute.
Yeah,
For
please.
those who may not have heard that Broadcom has been drugged back into the circle and 8.0.3 V1 or something like that is now freely available again.
Oh, for ESX, I am guessing.
ESXi.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
Broadcom realized how bad they were crippling their business model by not having that available for home labs and other entities.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
If you've got a
So
link,
after
drop
everybody
it in.
migrated off of it, said piss on VMware, they finally went, oh, maybe that was a bad idea.
Okay.
Maybe. Well, that's bad news for us because, the ESXi's bad pricing was a good business opportunity the last year.
Yeah.
I think they've gone through enough bad press.
Yeah, who's going to trust them? It's like,
Exactly.
It's Broadcom.
yeah. Welcome on
Can't-
Tanig.
Thank you. Can't even trust their
More
Wi-Fi.
than anything, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
I think it's to pacify their large dollar customers that want their technicians to be able to have copies of this running at home.
Yeah, work from home. What a concept. Hello.
You might take a little bit of solace in that anybody who's kind of already started the migration process is probably not going to stop it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure on that.
Welcome, Dave.
Anybody that's completed it's not going back.
Yeah. Let's just get Anshnig, if you're pressed for time, Tubner posted on the Fediverse, hey, he's pushing the limits on storage and found that VMware has a limit of 62 terabytes for a disk image.
Yes.
And Jan did some quick and dirty thin provision tests of like 64 terabytes and 1 petabyte. Thank you very much. I'm curious what you're doing on your, you got your own question here. What are you doing on your giant scientific system?
We do VDEVs
Yep. How big?
for booting. The booting one is tiny, is 2 terabytes.
That's
But
tiny.
well, yeah, for us it is. But we've also booted bhyve VM with a VDEV that was all of our storage. This was during our testing phase because I was thinking of having ZFS on Linux inside the VM and then just passing the VDEV to the virtual machine. So if needed, I can shut down the VM, but then import the ZFS from the. Let me bring it again. I would have had 2 layers of ZFS, one on the host, and then the VDEV would be passed to the guest, and then that would be running ZFS on Linux. The nice thing of that is that if needed, I can shut down the VM, but mount the VDEVs mount as the Z pool inside the VDEVs anyway, right? That was the idea. For that, I did all of our storage, which was, I think it was 230 terabytes.
Is your pool built with a compatibility flag?
Yes, it was. At the time when I was doing the testing, it was. And I was able to do all of that in the testing. Then I realized this is a pain in the ass. So I chose another pain in the ass, which I know better. That was NFS.
You have
I
an
actually
interesting definition of tiny.
I use ZFS in a dual boot. I use FreeBSD's boot environments to dual boot FreeBSD and Debian
Yeah.
from the same
Uh,
pool. From the same
but
pool.
my,
They're two
my,
different boot environments.
my Tiny is going to get changed a bit more lately as we are building the 2 terabytes, the 2 petabyte system, which
Yeah.
is going to be extended to 4 terabytes, 4 petabytes in the future. I have to get used to using the word petabyte on
Yeah.
daily basis.
All right, tiny.
Rodney, has your work escaped the lab and run down the street to, say, my house in a formal way?
Which work?
No, you're dual booting with the boot environments between FreeBSD. Have you
No.
polished that?
No, it's not
gem?
polished. It's still
Okay.
a little bit raw. And because things have evolved now, I need to upgrade it for newer FreeBSD and newer Debian.
For the like loader feature flags or something?
No, it's
Oh,
just
okay.
it's I believe that at FreeBSD 15 we have a different default set of pool parameters. So I have to make sure that my creation stuff is all running under FreeBSD. So I have to make sure I create a properly compatible pool with older Debian Linux.
Totally. Yeah. Well, that's cool.
And it's like, I think if you just use OpenZFS 2.1, you're pretty safe.
Cool.
Or is that the one with two flavors? There's OpenZFS 2.1 FreeBSD and OpenZFS 2.1 Linux, which
Oh,
really
goodness.
bothers me.
Yeah, not helpful.
Michael, if I may,
Yeah,
just
please.
one update from the previous calls, as I'm gonna
Yes.
leave in a bit. The networking bug that Patrick and I talked about, and then me and one of other people have talked about during the jails calls of Vultr having an issue with PF.
Okay.
I've been updated by their network team that they've redone their network structure. So they told me to test again. Now I don't have VMs on Vultr, so it's hard for me to test, but I'll try to fire up one. However, Patrick, I just wanted to let you know if you want to test again with PF and not modifying anything else, see if it should work, because the issue in VTnet has been fixed separately, but it was consistent on DigitalOcean and Vultr specifically. At least I think DigitalOcean fixed it later on. Vultr told me that they redid their network and they should be able to do it again. For PF, you still have to disable TSO, LRO. Yeah, that makes sense, Jan. Yes, but we were also disabling the checksumming. I think now we don't need to. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the TSO and LRO would be disabled by default when it's a VTnet. The defaults have been changed in 14. I might be wrong, but I think
What?
Yeah, I think the defaults have been changed on VTnet on 14. Because I've been running it on Cameo a while back on Mac OS, and I haven't seen TSO on LRO.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but you
This
should
sounds
be
like the
able
same
to.
problem I talked about the other day.
Exactly. Rodney, any update on that? So what you had, as I understood it,
No, I
was
haven't.
2 VMs, no checksumming because they're local, and then one goes out the door for tunneling, and wow, you get like host memory in place of a
You get
checksum.
unchecksum packets out to the wild.
Bingo.
No, invalidly checksum once. You don't even get a zeroed or all ones checksum. Apparently, it's a more or less random checksum value.
Yeah, password or something. I don't know.
Nah,
Okay.
hopefully it's
Hopefully not.
from some kind of body allocator, so and the alignment works out so that it's only an other packets checksum, but yes.
Antonik, do you know from the top of your head if that fix means that we just switch the default to not offloading the checksumming to the hypervisor, or if we really implemented partial checksumming now there is a long-standing year-old bug report. I'm still trying to find it in the pass-through notes of our meeting. And we have simply been lacking the code necessary to do it the right way, like Linux does in a hypervisor environment.
I honestly don't know. So what I did, at least on my machine, is basically I used to modify all of the configurations when I'm running PF like you did on Volter, on QEMU. And now I don't anymore on QEMU and nothing. And the reason why I know this is because I run an IDS on FreeBSD, so I have to make sure these flags are correct. So I'm always having a look at them. But the last time my team did and I did, we didn't have to change anything and everything worked fine. We only changed the kern.huts, which is the kernel frequency update, from 1,000 to 100, and that has also been changed in 14.2 to 100 again on ARM64. So whoever did that, thank you, I guess. But that one has also been fixed. Otherwise, your CPU, instead of idling, it would have, it would have gone to 100% from the host perspective. So that has been fixed as well. I've just moved to 14.2. Let me put it this way.
I want to make an assertion there. Somebody said that Linux does this correctly with the checksumming. No, their hypervisor does very bad things with the checksum offloading, and it will gladly send bad checksums out a tunnel device.
Yeah. So
They do have the bits that if it goes out a physical interface on the host, that will end up checksumming it. But if it goes out via another VM or a tunnel device, it won't get checksummed.
Yep.
Yeah. So I do have a customer who does Volter VMs. I'll talk with them tomorrow to get access and test it and come back with more info next week, which is also Patrick. I wanted to ask you the question maybe after the call or tomorrow because I'm going away. That customer wants to move the servers to Germany and we were thinking about using your services. I said, I have a friend that they might be able to help.
Depends on the requirements, of course.
Yes, I'll contact you over punkt there.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you.
Dave, what's up?
Nothing actually. I just for once had a week without Irish pub music to go to. So obviously this is my second choice. I just came to see what was up.
Okay. We've been a little all over the map, but it's quite pleasant. Yesterday we did a high availability roundtable. So yeah, it's all good. Having missed you on the jail call, I'm curious if it's looking like things are good on jail descriptors and friends for 15.
The jail descriptor stuff, I don't know. I think that's.
Oh, and Igor's project was
Jail metadata.
Yeah, metadata, yes. Descriptions, metadata. I have my brain.
Just waiting on people to throw stones at it and come back and say they don't like it, and it all needs to be different. Yeah.
But Dave, if I understand that feature correctly, you can update individual key value pairs via the jail set system call. It's just that you read it all joined via the sysctl, which in my opinion is fine.
Yeah. So the kernel interfaces will take any garbage you give to us, and we promise to give it back. And then the user land side says, "Okay, thank you for the garbage. I will now try and do something useful with it." Yeah.
Can you do a jail get on the individual key value pairs?
Yes. I'm pretty sure that's always been in there. Yeah.
In that case, yeah, that's fine. Having sysctl aggregated all
so I'd be really annoyed now if after six months or whatever we didn't have it.
Yeah, it took far too long.
Speaking of testing, please test Alex's EDK2 bhyve firmware update. It has pretty graphics. It moves really quickly. It's based on 2025 code. Please, please, please. And this has been a topic from the jail calls. FreeBSD 15.0 release goals. Any wish list items relating to bhyve?
Just a question on that port. Does that allow Windows 11 to work? Because it's been a while, but the last time I tried Windows 11, it wouldn't work because of the security. What's it called?
PPM?
It Yeah, I think so.
That's been in there since 14.2. Thank you, Hans. There is. Oh, actually, did it not make it in? Oh, I don't think it made the cut. So yes,
It
Hans,
just
maybe
Windows has
enlighten us.
actually
The
said
TPM
you lack the
emulation should be there.
device.
Yep.
Right. It wasn't emulated right or something, or didn't pick it up right. Windows complained you don't have the hardware security device to install it. Yeah, that was like a year ago though.
Right. I think Hans's work, he's on the call, just missed the 14.2 cutoff, such that there is TPM emulation in 15, but not 14.2. And of course, you can put it in lab mode and other tricks, but I'm sure they're trying to take all that away.
Yeah, it would have been like an earlier version of 14 that I would have tried it on. So,
Yep.
okay, thanks.
Yep. Although you would have had pass-through available if that helps you, but I don't know if the host and the VM would compete for the hardware pass-through. Anyway, or TPM rather. Oh gosh, on the chat, Jan, you've put a wish list item for faster software networking, but I doubt if that's a project that could be complete in a short amount of time for 15, because in Unix years, time is brutal. Let's look at this bug someone just posted.
Just a small addition, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no worries.
To be clear, the hardware did have TPM in it, like it was modern hardware.
Yeah.
It was purely a software issue.
Oh, okay, right, but it needs to make its way to the VM to be supported, I'm guessing. Who is the unicorn posting about this? That's Google declared you a unicorn.
That's me, Patrick.
Hello. So that's the ticket, and it's as old
I'm
as
just filling in the details.
Thank you. 2012. Huh. Still present in 10.1. Oh, this is a lovely ticket. Huh.
There may have been some code changes in the last decade, just possibly.
12.1 workaround. Okay, going through time here. I like this. Okay. I suppose I can put that in the chat for those who celebrate. ARM64 and bhyve, what exactly is the question? Was that?
Oh, my one.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I completely forgot about this. I've conned a friend in Sweden who does embedded ARM64 development into using my ARM64 bhyve down the bottom here, down the bottom in the cellar to work on. And we're running into the interesting overlap between a custom uboot at their end and our slightly custom uboot bhyve ARM64 one down here. So far today, we actually got it all working, at least to the point where he can read squashfs. But I wonder if anyone else has been down this path before and has wisdom to share on fiddling with uboot and bhyve.
So squashfs for a wild guess Linux VM or what?
It's
what
Linux,
role does it play?
Yeah, when you run a VM on bhyve on ARM64, you need to use the uboot stuff if it's not FreeBSD. Yep.
Yeah.
And the uboot that we have doesn't have squashfs support, so I recompiled that with it. And yeah, it's just really finding out if there's anyone else who's more knowledgeable about this rather than just having me mash around it in my usual fashion.
Well, did you bury the lead? Were you using bhyve load previously?
No, because this is all Linux. It's a
but correct, but it's supported on ARM64?
Yeah, it's an ARM64.
And you've used bhyve load for a FreeBSD VM?
I would use bhyve load for a FreeBSD one, yeah.
Sweet. I didn't even think to try that.
I assume so. It's been so long since I've run a bhyve VM on stuff.
Let's see. Eva, have you gotten your feet wet with uboot on alternative non-Intel platforms?
Specifically on ARM, yes. A little bit on RISC-V, but I also have bricked some RISC-V devices with uboot, so I don't really want to go into that.
Did any
But on
dictate the
the
need for squashfs? Go ahead.
yes, specifically actually on this R6 that's right here sitting on my desk,
Ooh.
there is a FreeBSD SD card also floating around here somewhere. Not in the NVMe box, irrelevant. That has a squashfs mount for the memory loader, like memory-based disk that gets deployed, because we don't currently have a driver for the eMMC in the NanoPi R6, and so it has to boot up on the SD card. The uboot has to go through its stages and then load the image into memory and run entirely off of that, kind of like BSD router project does.
Yeah, that's
so that actually might be a place to look at the code. Like if you're looking for a squashfs code for BSD specific, that would be where I would point you to.
Yeah. Well, so far we got. I've never used squashfs, so far today was good progress. We compiled a version of uboot, at least on my system, that has the squashfs support, and now we just got to figure out how to mangle all of his other stuff into the same setup. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, if you want to contact me on some chat network, then we can talk about it.
Cool. Well, I'll wait till I get a problem. At least I've got someone to go and ask questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Or email as well. And my email is really simple. It's just my name, my first name, at my last name.com.
Easy. Mit oder umlaut.
Yeah, no umlaut, of course.
Yeah.
Let's see. Andrew, do you have any follow-up thoughts and beyond for our high availability discussion, shifting from storage to the hypervisors?
I don't think so. At least not. I mean, like I said, I pretty much, as much as possible, end up pushing high availability to the application. That's what knows how to do it best.
You are consistent. I appreciate that.
I try to be.
Been on the cutting edge of building both of those. It's much cheaper to do it in the application.
Nicely put.
Yeah.
Do you have I'm guessing a toolkit of various, be it databases and otherwise, that have their own replication? And what was this about? Was it Minio or Dovecot or someone took away the HA?
Dovecot will, in the upcoming release, remove the replication logics. There will be synchronization logic, but nothing to trigger it when a message changes. So if you still want to run a two-node failover cluster, you have to run replication in a cron job and hope, or cobble something inotify based together or whatever. Because they're saying basically the open source version is only supposed to be usable for single server deployments from now on, because not enough of you are buying our ridiculous service offering where you have to run it on a supported operating system and storage, and you need a 6-node minimum configuration for the latest so that you can form 2 quorums.
I wonder why not enough people bought that.
Yeah, the old version, I can understand why people didn't buy it, because the old replicator logic and so on, the full featured deployment is very annoying to deploy on virtualized environments because you need fairly tight network and storage and host integration. Now, the new version coming with the next big release is a lot more cloud friendly, with the idea that basically all the messages are stored on object storage and so on, which means you can easily put it in basically any cloud platform on big commercial Linux distributions, or commercial friendly. So basically, I think it's Red Hat and Ubuntu Server. on, yeah. And the pricing is just not really reasonable for small deployments. It is reasonable for really big deployment. If you're an ISP and you need 1 million email accounts to serve, okay, talk to them, negotiate a reasonable contract. I'm pretty sure they will come up with mutually compatible price points. But if I have my 20 to 100 users,
I just had to connect. Can you hear me? I just
Yeah,
had to
hold tight,
connect
yeah.
to the meeting.
Jan's wrapping something up. We hear you,
then
Cretonian.
there isn't really a reasonable pricing model for that, because while grumbling, I may be willing to throw them a few bucks a month for, but not the minimum pricing and not the requirement to run it on busy blessed deployments to get any support.
Okay, a little off topic, but awesome.
Yeah.
Jan, bringing it back, you mentioned suspend resume. Has anyone heard about any movement on the various metadata saving formats that John worked on, or anything related to suspend resume, CBSD and friends? Anything?
Just that they're thinking about changing it, but that only really matters when you want to keep the suspended state for any length of time. If you only want to use it to resume on the same infrastructure without updating in between and so on, then I don't think it matters. Maybe if you want to use it to go across major releases, but yeah, that's not supported right now.
Okay.
So
where's that
may
conversation
work,
taking
but
place?
it used to take place on the virtualization mailing list or emulation mailing list, I think.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, some
Cretonian,
of it
you
I
have
think was
ignition.
cross-posted to hackers.
Okay. And maybe architecture? I don't know. Cool.
I can't remember seeing it there, but I'm
Thank you.
not reading all of it.
Cretonian, you got your audio working. Do you have any topics, questions, ideas, concerns, funny jokes?
Yeah. So far I have 3. The
Oh.
first one is for Jan, actually, because he recommended a driver one day. I'm using Wayland, Sway, and Chrome to connect to this call.
Oh.
And I just wanted to know what drivers or packages could I download to make my video and audio work on this device. And I know Jan has actually given me one before, but recently I migrated from 12 to 13, and some during that not 12 but 14.1 to 14.2, and I think it might be 14.3, but I did that process and some of my packages got deleted. Fudge. Yeah, it's 14.1 to 14.2. So that's one question. Yeah, I have that one, the 14.2 P3. I have that version. And the only reason I know is because when I submitted a bug it's 14 release P3.
Are you saying it stopped working with the update and you could no longer do either the audio, as per you calling in,
or the video? Yeah,
or video?
I just wanted to know the name of that. Yeah, I just wanted to know the name of that package, right? Because I believe last time Jan gave me one. I don't have it anymore. Now Zoom Web Client works for me for this too.
OSS audio.
I have a question for you. How exactly did you upgrade? Because the upgrade itself from the base OS should not delete any packages per se.
So what I did first is I wanted to stay on 14.1, but I needed to make a documentation upgrade, right? On the docs, right? And then in order for me to do that, they had this but just to quickly answer your question, before doing the upgrade, I tried to do a package update and a package upgrade, right, on 14.1. And then now 14.1 is end of life at this point. So from what somebody told me is that, my pack, when I do that, it's looking at the URL of 14.1 packages. However, those don't exist anymore, and there's only the URL works for 14.2 packages. So when I did that, my Wayland client literally broke, and I just literally could not enter Wayland, right? Like I debugged it for hours, and it just, Wayland and my window manager Sway just did not work until I upgraded my device using the you have the FreeBSD upgrade documentation, right? So this is what happened to me, just to answer it quickly, right?
Right. It sounds to me like, so you had either a FreeBSD upgrade, but you also did a package upgrade. And I think what went wrong for you there is the upgrade of the packages, not the actual upgrade of the OS.
No.
No?
I think I can answer what happened from the symptoms. The most likely explanation is that Bretonnian, to be able to run Wayland with acceleration, has installed kernel modules in the form of video card drivers from packages.
Yes.
And the official FreeBSD package repositories are compiled on the oldest supported minor release in each major release, because that, in theory, gives you the compatibility with all newer minor releases in the same major release. And that's true except for some kernel modules, which includes all video drivers. And because of that, we recently, after years of debating what's the perfect way of doing that, gained a designated kernel modules binary package repository for the minor releases. And you can install those, register that repository in your configuration with a higher priority, install the kernel modules, and then it finally works like it should. Have been the case for ages, but we just never agreed as a community of what's the best way. Now we have a way, which is a valid way, but you have to know about that. There was no big shout out, as far as I remember, that this has happened. So I dropped the URL. I can go into a system where I have a suitable configuration. And right now, because 14.1 went end of life, the build cluster has or should have moved to 14.2. So right now it will work. But once you upgrade to 14.3, whenever that comes out, it will break again after the upgrade unless you change it. So I'm looking for the right configuration there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's just one of those things that hooks to the kernel, and you just got to compile it yourself.
No.
Yeah,
You don't. No longer.
And I chose not to compile it and just upgrade my system because that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that
do.
process might break it because you might have to compile it. Is what I'm trying to say.
You don't.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah, so I chose not to compile it, and well, I want to hear what Jan has to say. Jan is more of an expert than I am. So.
This should work right now. Afterward, you have to install all the kmod packages from that repository again with something like package install -r FreeBSD kmods.
Right, but which version of FreeBSD will that work on? I can be on 15 current, 14 stable, or whatever.
That will work on all releases. As you can see, if you look in the chat,
even stable branches?
I said releases, not stable.
Releases, okay, gotcha.
Does anybody in this round know the approximate budget of the package build cluster and the package download sizes? Because I always wondered with the hardware growth and Moore's law and the storage space being cheaper and cheaper and cheaper every month, why we do not just throw money at the problem and build packages for every supported release. So have a package repo for 14.1, one for 14.2, as long as both are supported, and then for 14.2 and 14.3, as long as both are supported, and so forth.
I know that stuff, yes. So we spend about 60 to 100K a year on replacing hardware. And we also have to pay for the power consumption of that infrastructure as well. So that's roughly hardware-wise what we've got, and obviously it varies from year to year. What was the other question? Yeah, what sort of size? It's about 20 terabytes, 24 terabytes per mirror, and you need about 150 gigabytes, must be 150 gigabytes an hour roughly of download speed of bandwidth is used for a mirror. So the main problem we have is if we were to do that, we would basically double the size of all the mirrors we have, and that would mean we would have to get rid of most of them because they would be too small.
And the other problem is that building all the ports already takes a cluster several days, like 3 or so days basically is the time it takes to build one port tree and then to build the new one after and so on, which is a problem because you would basically double more or less the number of ports builds you have to run. And if you have a bunch of WebKit and ROS and CMake updates in 1 week, which is not that unrealistic given the update frequency of those ports, suddenly you will have a 2-week delay until you rebuild the next security patch set for other ports. It's really a problem that some of the ports have ridiculous compile times, and there is no one perfect configuration to build both lots of small ports and the ridiculously large ports without manually tuning the make conf for the node worst offenders and manually overwriting the sort order. I guess you could use some simple machine learning algorithms, not basically just statistics, not AI bullshit, to infer that similar-ish version numbers will have similar build times, and then use the historic build times to compute a near optimal schedule, basically by assuming that the next build will run the same like the previous build. You could make a near perfect schedule and maybe auto-tune the number of concurrent builders and so on. Or we need to bring back features from Tinderbox to allow distributed builds so that you can run one ports tree through multiple build servers at the same time. Whereas Poulier assumed that with SMP advances and multi-socket servers, you can do it all on one machine at a time, which means it takes about 3 days to go through 40,000 ports on a very big server.
It's even more than that. It's much longer than that. Some of the build servers will take up to 2 weeks to complete the cycle.
Yep.
So,
some of them.
Yeah. Throwing money, we need a lot more money.
Yep.
And it's not just our money, it also impacts the mirrors.
I guess the mirrors could be helped if we had some kind of smarter scheme where there would be some kind of caching logic where you don't keep every package on every mirror.
We are working on CDN stuff that's coming. Cluster admin is doing the things.
The biggest problem, in my opinion, here with
I'm just saying we're working on CDN support, which makes that a lot simpler for many people because you don't need a full mirror. The CDN will cover it, but hard. It's a hard problem that requires changes either in hardware or in package to teach it to be aware of subversions of FreeBSD rather than just major versions.
In my opinion, the
problem
proper way to fix
horsepower or like a distributed compiler almost.
Yeah. It's, I think the experience in the past of having distributed compiles is that it doesn't gain you a lot of speed, but it certainly gains you a lot of complexity. And then that's more trouble to fix and resolve. And we have maybe, like, I'm going to pick a number here, about 10 or 15 really large key ports that everyone bottlenecks on. There's CMake, 3 versions of GCC, 4 versions of LLVM.
May I guess, is
Let
Chrome
him
on
finish,
itself?
please.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that kind of sort of bottlenecks everything. And there's a few long tail ports, but not so many of them.
Yeah, I know that some of them, like Chrome, I know personally takes a while, and there's other ones. I think just the pure raw horsepower issue kind of a thing.
Also, we keep adding stuff. Like we have LTO support, link time optimization support enabled on builds now, and that results in broadly speaking, better code.
Please let him finish. Please let Dave finish when he's talking. Sorry to interrupt.
To many of the packages.
Right.
I'm aware of the problem with a few large ports like compilers, like Rust and all that stuff that take an eternity to build. We run our own Poudriere, but we take 24 hours or something at most to rebuild everything. So we just build tiny parts apparently of what FreeBSD builds.
Yeah. If you have a subset of ports, and if you use Poudriere has an option now to fetch, it can work out whether a port you needed locally actually has no local changes, so you can just use the one from package.freebsd.org. And I get most of my builds done maybe in about 3 or 4 hours now as a result of that. That's great. Yeah. But it doesn't solve the general problem.
Jan, you have a comment on this topic.
So, yes, I have. The problem with distributed builds is, yes, something like this CC adds a lot of complexity and fragility, but having a shared package cache and building across multiple machines so that you just treat them as additional jails for building shouldn't increase complexity much, as long as you keep your packages on the same NFS server, so that you have one shared file system. So yeah, but it may require some re-architecturing in Poudriere, but the actual port infrastructure wouldn't even notice, because it's just mounted the same way through a centralized scheduler. It's just that you would basically run SSH JExec instead of just JExec, or SSH jail instead of just jail.
Cool. Craytonian, I kindly invite you to get in touch with Jan out of band and discuss that, because you're probably not the first one facing that. And I love the fact that you are dogfooding FreeBSD to attend these calls. I am absolutely not married to Zoom and Google Docs. In fact, I'd like to escape them, and I've actually made a summary this last week of the different available tools and their strengths and weaknesses, because I hate Discord is not a constructive statement, because it does some things very well that you absolutely cannot do on IRC or several other platforms. So I'm trying to quantify what is useful in, say, moderating a call with a bunch of brilliant people from around the world, or hosting a conference, or doing all this stuff, and then say jumping in and doing a screen share or remote control of a screen share, which is where things get really complicated really quickly. And our friends at Jitsi had that feature and removed it for security reasons. So it is not a simple problem to solve. And thank you everyone who's constructively trying to make it easier. Other topics, questions, ideas, fun stuff. This has been great. Yes.
I have a question, and I could show you my configuration file, right? But when I use bhyve, what tends to happen is, no matter what OS I'm using, is that it stays at a certain position. Like my screen is a 16, is like an 8 by 16. If we're going like height by width, so height is 8, width is 16, right? And what happens is when I use bhyve, it takes up like a 4 by 4 part of my screen. Right.
You're talking
and
DNC
it's either the very middle
or what? Because bhyve
or
is
the left.
fundamentally non-graphical. What?
Yeah, I'm using Tiger VNC.
Okay.
But even when I use the console, the VM, or the bhyve console command, it's still the same thing inside my terminal, right? Like like for when I run FreeBSD inside my, and I could send pictures to make it make more sense, right? But even inside my terminal, when I use like the VM console command, it still sticks to a specific portion of my screen. And I'm using like the kitty terminal. So if I should be using something else in the terminal, but there's two separate ones. There's like what I think I'm using, which is the VM console command. And then there is the Tiger VNC, right?
Interesting.
And I wanted to know so this is not normal, is what you're saying?
Oh, and did you specify that, as Jan is pointing out in chat, did you specify the output resolution in the VM config? Because it can go from pretty tiny to pretty big. It's not as flexible as one might want, but you can control that quite a bit.
Would you mind if maybe I shared my configuration and then a photo of my VNC in the chat? Would that be
that, or do you want to share your screen even? I'm not against it. You had enough of me.
I am unable to share my
Can you
screen.
share over dog-fooded Zoom to FreeBSD as a question? So yeah, go ahead and share whatever you have. You can even drop a picture in the document, whatever works.
The config and pasty might be a good idea if that's
sure, please.
If that's shareable.
Pasty as in a third-party site to just drop it in there.
Yeah, any of those paste sites.
Yep, cool.
Yeah.
Or just
So,
you name it.
Using Chrome, it won't allow me to share my entire screen.
Okay.
I'm trying.
That's
but
cool.
unfortunately
Hey,
it
you're
won't.
doing Rod's work here.
I do want to. It's just like there's kind of issues with Wayland and that stuff.
Hey, so
I even tried to install OBS.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I even tried to install OBS, but that didn't work. But give me one.
Sure.
And I'm all for debugging these issues.
And hats off to Alexei, who first showed, say, nifty GPU pass-through and simply did an HDMI capture device. I had one here a minute ago to OBS, and that allowed for one to sit at their normal desktop and have the actual output from the virtual machine on hardware. Very clever. I appreciate that. I like people thinking. It's awesome. Amazing.
But I can say that, yeah, like Jan points out, there's settings for it. But if you don't set those settings, then yeah, that is pretty much the default behavior. I don't know it that well because we're mostly doing server type workloads, and I don't care about the aspect ratio and the resolution.
Well, it's not only that, right? But sometimes when I move and I have to make a video, right? But sometimes when I move my mouse towards the edge, what will happen is I can't freely move within that space, right? Like half the screen I am not able to access. So I have to like use the command line in order to do that, if that makes sense.
Do you happen to have some kind of pointer acceleration in either the guest OS or the parent OS?
I've never turned it on, but it could be on by default based off of my setup. So,
I know at least on Windows it is on by default. And it's the bane of my existence. That's why I know.
Do you know if you're in absolute this relative pointer mode?
Say that one more time.
Are you in absolute or in relative pointer mode on your frame buffer?
Tablet mode, I suppose.
I don't know. I don't know. I do apologize.
No worries.
I do not know.
Do you have a chat platform of choice, be it Discord or Signal or something? Because
there's no need to apologize. We're just trying to work through and figure out what's wrong.
Rephrase. Jan, are you on Discord? Because I know Craytonian is.
Yes, I
Yeah, no, I'm
have
on
them
Discord.
as a
So
DM content.
what?
Okay.
Yeah, what I'm doing right now is I'm actually adding the width and height as
Okay.
you have it there. And
So the unusual aspect ratios, so basically everything other than 4:3 or 16:9 may cause issues with things just not expecting them and not having a proper aspect ratio, splash screens and stuff. It should still be usable, but it wouldn't be pretty.
we'll see. I mean, I'm gonna use a 1280 by 720, and later I just care that it expands, and then so I'm gonna start my VM.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, here's my, let me actually cat the new configuration at KBVE comp. See.
Oh.
So here, oh, it didn't. So that's what my configuration file looks like.
There we go.
VM.
Under what? bhyve?
Yeah, this is for VM bhyve.
Okay.
So if we look at my the root directory that it's in z root bhyve, and then KBV is the name of the virtual machine. So
where's the graphics configuration? I'm seemingly missed. Oh, there it is, width and height. Though.
It's at the bottom below
Yep, got it.
Mac.
My bad.
Okay.
I'll maybe do just a snippet here. Because yes, there's specifically a little tablet mode flag. Maybe I can hop into a machine and pull that out. SSH. Yeah, I can attempt to multitask. La 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 la. CD VMs. CD 10. Cat Nintendo. Yeah, so for what it's worth, here are my flags and VM bhyve. That's what I'm doing, and I'm surprised you're getting away with just height and width abbreviated. So Jan, there's a new survey from the foundation. Do we know how much they spent to produce it? Oh, never mind.
Okay, so
and it didn't
do as VM VM list. Okay, so I'm booting into it, I'm connecting to it. Oh wow, that's a lot nicer. Yes.
But realistically speaking, I would consider the included VNC server as an emergency console only. If you want a pleasant remote desktop experience, I would recommend installing a server inside the guest and then accessing it over the network, and only using the video console via the remote frame buffer as out of band, unbreaking.
Wait, could you say that again? Sorry. So you said to
install something like FreeRDP or something in the guest, or if it is Windows guest, just enable the RDP server, or install a designated VNC server in the guest, because this can provide a far richer interface, like for example a resizable window, so that, or maybe if you're running Windows even where you have only floating windows and not the desktop backward, you just see the remote, just like with or Hack. If you're on FreeBSD, to FreeBSD. Maybe you even, if you trust the guest enough, you want to allow remote X11, like 2 decades back. But yeah.
I love the link. I appreciate it. There is that. Okay, and then I'll wait for my third question till next meeting, because I'm gonna read. I want to, like, one thing that I've found difficult a bit would be, so if I was debugging like a JavaScript application, or let's just say like because I do C#, a C# application. C# gives me an IDE where I can breakpoint debug and step through each line of code to understand it, right? But I'll wait until I read the debugging chapter inside the FreeBSD developer docs, right? But what I would like to do is use a GNU debugger to attach a debugger to a FreeBSD bhyve guest, and then like walk through a kernel module, right? Because I read the FreeBSD kernel module book, and I have all the code there, and I can understand it, right? But their methods of debugging are more so looking at the whatever stat tools, right? Like FS stat, or I believe it's like IO stat, net stat. Like that's the form of debugging versus like being able to debug the code, And I did try to look at like K-trace, like debugging, like K-tracing through a process, right? And but I'll wait, and remote KGB debugging isn't that easy unless the kernel code you're stepping through isn't time critical.
And have you seen John Baldwin's debugging bit in the manual page, the bhyve manual page?
I have manual. What do you mean by that?
So
I can
John
go
Baldwin
to
early on, Mr. Debugger added a debugging port. So I'd be curious if that's helpful to you, and I'd love to see a use case for it for we mortals. Go ahead, Jan.
So John Baldwin.
It's in the bhyve manual page. Just bhyve manual page. Take a peek. Look for GDB.
It's basically a simplified, emulated serial port for the kernel debugger, so that you can have a very primitive driver for it, which means you don't have to deal with networking at all if you're debugging from the host into a guest, which is fine for stuff you can debug in a virtual machine, but especially when it comes to debugging drivers, you have to do that on the actual hardware. And unless you have it passed through into the guest, you can't really do that.
So do you have a suggested method, Jan, of debugging?
What do you want to debug? Which kernel mod code? So can you debug it in a virtual machine?
So my kernel module was a hello world kernel module, and I wanted to kind of step through that code. So it just uses the macro, right? The KLD macro. It's like very simple. I can share the code as well. But yeah, it was just like very simple. And I kind of wanted to use that as a stepping stone to.
Spin up a bhyve guest with a GDB port and use that with GDB from packages or ports to debug via the, I think it shows up either as a character device or as a Unix socket, and you can then debug it as a special remote, extended remote or whatever. And then you can actually breakpoint it. But at the moment you have to deal, for example, with a graphics card driver, it becomes a lot more annoying, because then you have to deal with things. Oh, I wanted to single step this, but I have a few seconds deadline until the HDMI display gives up and switches to the other input or something. Then you have to deal with wall clock timeouts. You just can't stop. or heck, something more extreme, maybe with a deadman switch in an IPMI BMC. If you're trying to debug that driver and you're debugging this slowly, the system will just power cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
These are the
besides
annoying things where you can't get out of real-time constraints. The other problem is with debugging the kernel from its own user space is that you can deadlock the system. If you were to connect to a kernel debug socket over TCP from the system running the KGDB service, you could easily deadlock the system by maybe just stopping something which is required to schedule the debugger to continue, so that you've deadlocked your system. So you normally need two systems or a virtual machine and you have a host on other virtual machine.
Okay. The other thing that I would like to debug that I can't right now because I don't know enough about it, but would be like Wayland in my Sway window manager, because from my understanding of what like I've asked people, the reason that I can't use the reason that there are things like my audio that doesn't work like properly, and my screen sharing with Discord. And from what I've spoken to with other people, it seems to be like a Wayland, specifically like a Wayland issue, a graphics driver issue.
It is.
Right? And
no,
that's
it's a compositor
why
issue.
Wayland is, you said a compositor issue.
Yeah, so with Wayland, you have the what used to be the X server and what used to be the window manager / compositor is now just your compositor. So in your case, Sway, which is a re-implementation of i3 in Wayland, needs to have the extensions for screen recording and so on, because unlike X11, which has a non-existing security model between applications, where every application can impersonate every other application and can read every buffer and so on, by default, Wayland is a bit more secure, so that your little annoying notification widget jumping up and down can't just decide to read the keyboard input or whatever while you're typing into a password field. Yeah, with X11, there's no such guarantee. One application can spoof arbitrary user input to another application. That makes X11 very powerful and makes things like screen sharing possible to implement for any application, whether you want the application to be capable of doing that or not, because it's just all exposed all the time. With Wayland, it's not, and you need a custom basically screen sharing extension to allow screen recording and input spoofing, and these kinds of things. And I don't know if Sway supports that all, and if all of that has been enabled in the port on FreeBSD and so on, because on my FreeBSD desktop and laptop, I'm still running Xorg with i3. So
here's my question after that for you, Jan. If a person wanted to super specify and say, hey, I want to focus on screen sharing, because it's not only like Discord, it's also I can't screen share with Zoom, right? It just like whenever I try to go to the entire screen button, it just here my boss is calling me. I apologize, but you guys can continue. I'll come back.
Okay.
For anyone else listening, that's to be expected. The thing which will work if you're in a browser is to share another browser window or tab, because that's done in the application. And doesn't go through the.
Sorry. I can't say I follow.
So with Wayland, the server is a library in the compositor process. So you have the equivalent of a library like Western or something has a library and there are like 2 or 3 common libraries you use to run a Wayland server. And that is then compiled into your, for example, Sway compositor, and that compositor needs to implement the right extensions so that you can do things like screen sharing or screen recording. Yeah.
Can you, I think you're answering my question about specifying like if I wanted to focus on the future of screen sharing through Wayland, I think you were specifying like the best libraries to use to go about that, right?
And then your browser also needs to implement that if you want to do it from a browser. I don't know if the FreeBSD Chromium and Firefox ports are built with the Wayland recording, or maybe you can at least install something like WF Recorder to record.
Wait, it does support it because Wayland is used in GNOME, like the GNOME environment inside Ubuntu, right?
But GNOME will have its own compositor for Wayland.
Yeah, okay.
Now
here's a question, right?
It's something like called Sway Record or something like that. But that's only a screen recording. Now, if your compositor implements the Wayland extension for it, you still need applications capable of controlling that. And it could be that Chromium on FreeBSD is not built the way so that it supports screen sharing via Wayland, but only via X11 or something like that.
Is the FreeBSD?
No, Chrome supports it.
Is the FreeBSD?
Just to let you know.
Is the FreeBSD Wayland? Is that tracking the Wayland extensions closely enough to even include that? Because that's a relatively new extension within the last year, I want to say.
If I remember correctly, that's not up to FreeBSD, but to the individual compositor and their ports. There is no unified port for Wayland server because it's always part of another port. It's a bit messy and confusing coming from Xorg.
I think I get what you're saying, where one, there are 2 things that need to happen. The compositor and the application that I'm using, both of those need to support screen sharing, right? Now with Chrome, I could always switch to Chromium or Firefox because they are open source browsers. There's also LibreWolf, right, which is an open source browser. And this might be extreme, but if those extensions don't work on FreeBSD, a person would need to integrate that, right?
And that's not extreme, but it's not that the applications do not support it. I know from Linux users that Chromium on Linux can support this feature, but it has to be compiled in. I don't know if the FreeBSD port of Chromium compiles this in to Chrome, or the resulting executable lacks the support which may in theory exist in the source code just because the configure flag wasn't turned on, or maybe it wasn't turned on because nobody ported this part of Chromium to build correctly on FreeBSD. I don't know. That's up for maybe bring it up in the laptop and desktop calls on Mondays.
So I'll bring that up, and I don't mean to sound ridiculous or anything, right? But all right, so the application like Chromium, nobody needs to integrate it. It's already integrated. A person needs to recompile that whatever application that they're using to screen share. Now, the compositor, could a person then basically you recompile it, I guess, and then port it over, or while you're porting it over, because I think the process, we have a make file. So the process of porting software over is basically just recompiling it on your architecture and seeing what's missing, like what libraries that you need, stuff like that, and then downloading those libraries. so it compiles correctly, right? So that doesn't seem too crazy to do,
look so
right?
simple.
I'm listening.
You make it sound so simple, but you should look at the FreeBSD Chromium port before you say that again, because that
Well, I
port
understand
is
with the
an
Chromium port,
ungodly
the security
mess
updates.
of patches which are refused upstream because Google can't be bothered to deal with FreeBSD patches. They just don't give a fuck and refuse them without looking at them. Because, oh, it's not for one of the common Linux distribution, Mac OS or Windows, we don't give a flying fuck. We don't want it. Even if it doesn't cost us anything but an initial review, they just refuse to accept patches. So the port
They refuse to accept
has
patches.
a ridiculous amount of patches to make it build, because even trivial things like a missing if def to treat FreeBSD like Linux or something just isn't accepted.
I see.
And then it will say,
Yeah,
oh,
I see what
unknown
you're.
architecture refusing to build or something. Yeah, it's really annoying state of affairs.
That's okay. They killed what is it? Must staple by just refusing to implement it too.
Yeah, that feature, yeah, certificate validation. I can see both sets why you would want it or not, because the whole infrastructure just wasn't designed to ever handle that volume. I think what we will get instead is an ever shorter maximum validity of certificates. I think then we'll now go down to something like 40 or 50 days maximum allowed certificate lifetime for OCSP must stable as an alternative. Yeah. Because OCSP was never supposed to be used like that. And in my opinion, it should never have had an always ask the CIA mode, where it should only have been implemented as the server must obtain a short-lived validation and only work with stapling, but that was never accepted. And OCSP without stapling is totally unacceptable, in my opinion, at scale. You can only use that for your own little internal CA.
Hey, Jan, I just want to confirm with you, because you did say that I did make it seem easy, but essentially a person would just have to recompile the compositor and the application that they're using, right? Now, because it's just for me, like I don't mind going through these extra things so long that it works, because like a lot of people want me to share my screen and I want to share my screen, but I can't, and it would be easier for people to help me debug it, which is why I'm invested in this issue, right?
Amen.
Is because, and I mean, Xorg is great, right? But it seems that the feature is Wayland, and a lot of applications are trying to support Wayland. And I mean, I like Wayland. I like the how it works. It's a bit buggy, but it could be better. So I just wanted to confirm that there's no need to rewrite code, right? There's only a need to reconfigure and compile and then port over the kernel, not the kernel, but the compositor and the application I'm using, which is Chrome, which could be Firefox, which are open source. I'm listening.
It's quite likely that you have to read a bit of code and to get it working, but you shouldn't have to implement the feature. But you may have to
that's cool.
Do the porting work of some symbol is missing here because they expect some Linuxism if you're on this set of platforms. This kind of thing, like messages, maybe write a little patch there, and
oh, I still have to write a patch. Okay.
maybe.
All right. So I'm gonna ask a loaded question, right? But just based off of me asking you this, what would you say would be like the level of difficulty for this, right? Because I'm not thinking that it's a challenge, but I want to respect that you think that it's going to be a significant effort. It seems like that I'm getting from you, right, to get this to work.
It could be really simple, and basically, someone forgot to enable this flag. If you're lucky and you find the right change, it could be on as simple as someone having overlooked something, or just a one-line configuration change in your Sway config. I don't know. It could be really messy, low-level hackery required to make it work correctly. I just don't know. I can't give you the scope of the project without attempting it myself.
No, I completely
would
understand.
have to set up a system with Sway on FreeBSD and try it. Try recording.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna start.
So there is a tool like Sway Record or something to record your
Sway Record.
Sway something record. I don't know if it's ported to FreeBSD, but I've seen it mentioned by Linux users while Googling during the conversation. So
it is
or WF recorder.
There's like Sway screen record.
Yeah, and if that can capture your screen, maybe even your audio, you know that Sway has the feature. Then it's up to some application to make use of that, which would be probably a browser. You could then try different browsers on FreeBSD, potentially even the Linux only Chrome build in the Compat environment, to see if any of them ship with this enabled.
It might be good to test with something more simple, like just a screen grab utility.
Yeah, that's what WF recorder is.
Okay.
WS
just
recorder.
Record your screen or something to a video file. So it could be as simple as running this command in a shell in your Wayland session. And that should just record your whole screen, and then you Control C it, and it ends the file, and you can use something like MPV to play it back, or VLC, or whatever your preferred video player is.
So in this way, I do not have to recompile anything. I would just basically download or port this. I would download this package, compile this package, or port it over from Linux to FreeBSD, and this should be simpler, right?
Probably run a search on fresh ports to find what exists in the ports tree, with something you can just install from package, so that you don't even have to compile anything, if that works. Otherwise, use fresh ports to look at the build options. Maybe some packages just not compiled by default with this feature enabled. Maybe someone has an ideological problem with enabling screen grabbers or something for security reasons, because I don't want it, so nobody should have it. These people exist and can cause this kind of fallout. I don't know. Do the research.
I see. Yeah.
Running against that wall until you break through. And yes, we're still recording.
Thanks, Jan.
Even if we're completely off topic, maybe we should cut the recording. But apparently,
he's discussing how to consume these calls on an open source operating system. That's good. That's on topic. Go ahead. Sorry to overspeak you.
or we have to create some content for our future AI overlords to screen grab. I don't know.
All right. Have we exhausted these topics? And I hope, Crichtonian, I hope that sets you in the right direction. And thank you everyone for your patience on this and your listening in. Hopefully you've learned something. Or you can tell your boss you're working. I love it. It's all good. Final topics, questions, ideas, funny jokes, t-shirt ideas. Let's see. If I were to ask you, Crichtonian or Vince, would you like the honors? Do you know what I'm referring to?
I am unaware.
Well, Andrew, if you're unmutable, let her rip. Oh, we probably jumped in.
Like and subscribe.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend. I'll be around a little bit. Jan, if we can talk Mikrotik, let's do that. But I can imagine you're pretty busy. Take care, everyone.